Hello and welcome to Spy Hard's podcast, where your hosts go deep undercover into the world of spy movies to decipher which films make the knock list. But remember, this information is strictly for your ears only. I'm Agent Scott.
And I'm Cam the Provocateur, watching the years of his life burn away like a Spectre base at the end of a James Bond movie.
Can you believe that we're now podcasting into the year 2025, and we started in 2020. Our 5th birthday is going to be in this coming year.
We are like seconds away from ascending to the heavens like the Star Children at the end of 2001: A Space Odyssey.
I was thinking more of the cast of Casino Royale 67 at the end when they're in the heavens.
Oh, that's right. Playing a harp and wearing... Wait a second. Is that the future, though, or is that just we shuffle off the mortal coil?
Oh, you think we're going to end up in heaven with Peter Sellers?
Is that heaven, from what I've heard?
Don't ask Jacqueline Bisset, I'll just tell you that.
Okay.
With David Niven.
Oh, he seems delightful.
He does.
Yeah, we watched him recently in a Patreon movie, The Bishop's Wife, and he was wonderful.
I'm sure Cary Grant will be there too.
Oh, you know it is not heaven without Cary Grant holding court.
He's at the door. Cary Grant's at the door like, hey kid. You're like, oh, it's Cary. Hi.
Is he the master of ceremonies when you get there?
Like the compere, he comes out and introduces everyone, tells a joke. Yeah, I'd go to that.
Who is the better master of ceremonies when you get to heaven to kind of welcome you in as a spy fan, I suppose? Cary Grant or Roger Moore? They both seem like a lot of fun.
Oh, you curveballed me there with Roger Moore. Oh, that's impossible.
Right?
That's genuinely... I mean... I think Roger Moore would feel more fatherly to me.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Cary Grant has like a bit of... I suppose you don't want any sort of sex appeal in heaven. So I guess Roger Moore's the right way to go.
What do you want to experience in heaven, Scott?
I mean, I'm not going there, so I wouldn't worry about that too much. But I'm going down with Peter Sellers. I'll see you there. And on that note, folks, this is our wrap-up episode of 2024. Our famous. We enjoy it, certainly.
Obligatory? Either way.
Sure. Well, no, we love doing this episode every year, and it's not a clip show episode. We spend the next hour or so going back through the year, looking at our favorite moments, picking out our favorite films and stuff like that. But we also crunch some numbers.
Yes, we do.
And you stats fans out there, you love your numbers.
So many stats fans writing into Spy Hards on a weekly basis.
I feel like the Venn diagram of spy movie fans and stats fans actually has some crossover.
Okay.
Highly intelligent people. That's what I'm saying.
Right. It's kind of like they're like the Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy fans versus like the perhaps Man from U.N.C.L.E. movie fans.
I mean, Cam's like throwing dirt at half of our listenership right now.
No. I love both.
You dumbo, you thicko uncle fans out there.
Oh, that's not what I mean at all. Uncle's a ton of fun, but I feel like the stats fans are like the cold, cerebral spy films versus kind of the fun and jovial spy films.
But maybe they need a break from all of this hard numbers, and they go hang out with Matt Helm.
Oh, have a couple drinks with Matt Helm and loosen up?
Yeah.
Okay.
You know Dino's there.
That's true. Yeah.
Well, we love some stats. And it's interesting because last year we I found it funny. We covered 39 films in the year 2023.
Yeah, it was the 39 steps of 2023.
It was. Do you think we went higher or lower in the year 2024?
I would suspect maybe a couple lower because we released more like big interviews and special episodes in 2024 than any year previous, like episodes like the Music of Bond, for example.
Interesting. I'm not going to make you wait. We did one more.
Oh, interesting. So it was 40,
Yeah.
A number that does nothing for us whatsoever.
No. If it was like 42, you could do like the answer to life and things like that, the meaning of life. But no, 40 it was. And I didn't feel like we did any more particularly because I felt like we had a good run of like interview weeks and other stuff. But yeah, one more. We fit it in.
Is there anything we can do with the number 40? I don't think so. There's not even like, to the best of my memory, like a classic spy film that came out in 1940. I feel like a lot of the spy films or starting in kind of that war period.
I mean, you're the 40-year-old virgin.
Well, that's a Steve Carell film that hardly applies to this podcast, Scott.
Oh, I'm sorry. 40 Days of 40 Nights, maybe?
With Josh Hartnett?
Uh,
I don't think there is anything, which is
No.
kind of a bummer. Is there some sort of publication date tied to a James Bond novel, perhaps, or something? I don't know.
I mean, I'm really not going to dive into that, to be honest with you.
I don't think there is. I don't think that lines up either. Hitchcock directed Rebecca, which won the Best Picture that year for the Oscars. So, all hail Rebecca, a great movie that is not a spy film.
Foreign Correspondent came out that year?
Oh, that's a good one. We haven't covered that yet, but okay, awesome.
As did... and you know, we can connect it. Our 40th film was The Macintosh Man.
We're all diving off the boat.
Yeah,
we are evacuating 2024 the way that Paul Newman dove off that boat in The Macintosh Man.
I mean, given the state of the world right now, I would be diving off of that boat too.
I want to ascend and hang out with Cary Grant in heaven at this point, or Roger Moore.
Yes. Yes. I think many, many of us do.
I might even take Peter Sellers.
I won't comment too much on the current state, but Peter Sellers sounds like a good choice about now. Well, that's 40 films, but, you know, here on Spy Hard, we like to see if we can find the greatest spy movies of all time. And I can say in the year 2023, 5 films made the knock list. Cam, the question goes to you again. Over or under, how many do you think made the knock list this year?
I think it might be it's either dead even or perhaps one under.
It is 1 over.
1 over, so it was 6, which is my lucky number.
Oh, there you go. Do you think you could name them?
Allied,
Uh-huh.
To Trap a Spy,
Mm-hmm.
Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy,
Yeah.
Ghost Protocol,
Uh-huh.
Mission Impossible 3.
Yeah. One more.
This is, I feel like, the one that's going to trip me up because it's something that's a little. No, that didn't make the list. We loved the movie, but it didn't necessarily meet the criteria.
Well, what was that? Because people can't hear your thoughts.
Yeah, Possession. I was thinking about a movie we loved, but we didn't feel had enough strong spy elements to make the knock list.
Sure.
Oh God, I am blanking as to what that would be.
It came directly after MI3. Does that help you?
No. No, it does not.
Okay. The summer was a blur for Cam. It was Sneakers.
Oh, of course, Sneakers. How could I forget Sneakers? I always I do though, because for some behind the scenes on Sneakers, folks, like we dabbled with covering Sneakers well before we did. And so, like, I'd watch Sneakers a couple years in a row, I feel like, in preparation for episodes that then end up getting shifted. So I often think of Sneakers as a movie from 2023.
I can understand that. It was a long process to get that film reviewed, but I think it was worth it in the end. And we might have something in store for 2025 for the sneakerheads out there.
Yes, something really big that I'm not going to spoil any of it, but guys, strap yourselves in.
I mean, technically, we have to announce it at the end of the show, so you will be telling them at some point.
Robert Redford is going to be joining us for a retrospective episode on Casino Royale 67. He loves it.
He's not a big fan of sneakers, but he loves talking about Peter Sellers. That guy loves his Sellers.
He loves Casino Royale 67. Loves it to pieces.
Let's not tease them with something that hasn't happened, but there is something very big, and I think one of our best bits of podcasting we've ever done coming next week, and we'll announce it at the end of the show, so stay tuned.
Yeah.
Second
only maybe to My Spy 2.
Well, speaking of My Spy 2, for all good things, there must be a bad. The disavowed list.
Right.
So last year, we put 2 films on the disavowed list. That's our list of the worst, the pits, the dregs at the bottom of your pint. It's the last sweetie in the celebrations box that you just don't want to touch because it's gross. Some people think that's bounties. I think they're insane.
Well, when I was a kid, Bounty was like the worst chocolate bar you could get on Halloween. Second, maybe only to eat more. But you know what?
It's
Yes.
a very local references here. I have no idea what Eat More is.
I barely know what an Eat More is. I've had it, but I couldn't tell you exactly what it is. It's not like a chocolate bar. It's some weirdo thing. I'm sure there's someone out there that loves Eat Mores, but I'm not that person. I think the thing with Bounty is, and I'm gonna go off on a tangent about Bounty.
Oh, strap in, folks. Coconut time.
The thing about Bounty is, I think when you're a kid, you wind up getting bounties on Halloween, and things like that. And little kids don't like coconut chocolate usually. Like, it's pretty rare. It's more of an adult chocolate bar. And so I think a lot of kids grow up with this.
That should be their slogan, the adult chocolate bar.
I think a lot of kids grow up with this distaste for Bounty that carries over to their adult years. Whereas I think if they had a Bounty, maybe experienced it for the first time as an adult, they might actually like them more.
I think they should just be introduced to, like, coconut macarons early. Get them liking coconut. It's a fantastic sweet. I love coconut. I love Bounties. They're the first thing I eat in a celebrations tin.
I feel like coconut's a pretty polarizing taste for young kids.
I mean, do you think coconut is making the knock list or the disavowed list?
It depends on the age.
I see. What list is it making for you?
I like coconut, so it would make the knock list.
Of sweeties, of course. Need to eat official classics.
Yeah, but I wouldn't have liked coconut as a kid.
Okay. Well, let's hear the bounty heads out there. We want to hear from you. Are you eating them first in the celebration tins? I hope you are. Disavowed. Last year, we disavowed 2 films. How many do you think we did this year?
I think it was maybe one more. I think it was 3.
It was 3. Can you name them?
The Art of War.
Oh, he's straight in there with that. All right, go on.
One of Our Spies is Missing.
Mm-hmm.
And Eye of the Beholder.
Bingo.
Yeah. I think Art of War was bad, but it wasn't, I mean, it was terrible, but it was not on the horrible level that Eye of the Beholder was. Like, Eye of the Beholder is one of the worst things we've ever watched on this podcast.
I think Art of War was mediocrity.
But a little worse than that, because, like, I went and saw Kraven the Hunter yesterday.
Oh,
at the time of recording.
Okay.
And, like, that is a thuddingly mediocre movie. I actually think it might be the best of the Sony spider villain movies.
Oh.
But, like, it has nothing to offer just about, other than some action scenes and, like, a capable lead. But I look at Art of War, and yes, like, Wesley Snipes is a capable lead, but the movie around him is just a complete shambles. And it was not fun. It was often incredibly boring. And it just did not work almost any second of its runtime. Kraven has highlights. I don't like. There's no highlight to me really in Art of War.
Well, just to dive into Kraven the Hunter for a second. I mean, people have been clamoring for Aaron Taylor Johnson to be the next 007.
Yeah.
Will this help his case?
Let me put it this way. At a certain point in Kraven, I thought, man, I would have loved to have seen Aaron Taylor Johnson Kraven go up against Tom Holland's Spider-Man as a proper villain in a Spider-Man movie. And I love my Spider-Man movies. Not the Amazing Spider-Man movies, but I love my Spider-Man movies in general. And if I want to see Aaron Taylor Johnson as a villain, it means I think he's pretty good.
Okay. So that's a resounding maybe for Cam.
I could see him as Bond, and I think he could do it. Whether that happens, I don't know. But I did not walk out of Kraven going, nope, strike him off the list.
I don't get into this debate online too much on who should be James Bond, mostly because a lot of online is just a dumpster fire. But I mean, I saw the guy. I saw Aaron Taylor Johnson at the Royal Albert Hall as a guest of Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson at the Sound of 007 concert 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Right. And they've been searching for a Bond for a long time. He stayed at the GoldenEye Resort this year.
Uh-huh.
Right. Now, I'm not saying all signs point west, but there's no, if there's smoke, there's usually fire. Let's just say that.
Yeah, the only question is, like, when Bond is going to get rolling, because, we haven't really talked about it very much on the podcast, but, Eon has a lot of other projects they're focusing on right now. The second season
just announced,
well,
Chitty Chitty Bang Bang they're remaking.
Yeah, they're going to focus on a Chitty Chitty Bang Bang redo, I suppose. They have the second season and perhaps third season, I don't know, of the Bond Road to a Million show.
Mm-hmm.
They also have something else they're working on too. It's a theater performance of
Yes.
Othello, right, with Daniel Craig.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So it's like Eon is focusing on a lot of other projects. When I would tend to think if they're going to relaunch a Bond, they want that first and foremost in their minds, and they want kind of a clear slate to do that properly. Like once you get to the third or fourth, maybe they can take a more relaxed approach a little bit.
Mm.
But I would think they would be wanting to put all of their attention on properly doing this. And how are they able to do that if they're too busy focusing on chitty chitty bang bang?
Well, I think the other inherent problem is they might have, earmarked Aaron Taylor Johnson as Bond, which is absolutely fine, but they haven't got a director that we know of.
Nope.
And I think really the vision of whatever comes next for 007 starts with a director.
Yeah, and I don't know the state of a screenplay if they have something that
No.
excites them, because they have to tackle this from an angle that's going to interest them in pursuing for the next like decade plus of taking Bond in that particular evolutionary direction.
And in this world of disposability, of people not wanting to stick around for things anymore, back when we were growing up in the 80s and 90s, TV shows used to run 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 seasons, 24 episodes each. There was a glutton of content in that sense. I don't like using the word content, but like they did a lot. People tied in for a long time. Netflix now do 1 to 2, maybe 3 seasons at a push. People aren't tied in for these long contracts. And if you're going to be James Bond, they're going to sign you up for 4 films. And that, I imagine, scares people.
Oh, yeah. I think it limits your choices. It's like going way back in the day when they were like talking to Cary Grant about playing James Bond in the first Bond film. And Cary Grant was not going to sign up for like 4 or 5 Bond films.
No. And I think it all worked out pretty well for everyone involved, including Cary. But yeah, I totally get why you wouldn't. I mean, if you were an up-and-comer who hasn't got a name, they have a name, obviously, but I mean, like in a stardom, they're not a nameless person.
They're given a name when they get the job, and that name is James Bond.
It's not a code name, Cam. Don't say that. They'll come for you.
I'm poking the bear.
Oh, no. Please don't poke anything. Yeah, people are listening to this on like New Year's Eve, New Year's Day. People are hungover right now. We should be talking quieter.
Right. We haven't seen enough bears in spy movies. We've seen a lot of sharks and alligators. We haven't seen a lot of bears.
I saw enough bears in The Revenant. I don't think 007 needs to take on a grizzly.
No. I would be sort of interested in seeing it. Craven had a grizzly bear or some sort of large bear.
Didn't he also fight a rhino?
/
human hybrid, which is not how Rhino is as a character.
Yes, he did. And the Rhino of Craven the Hunter will make you nostalgic for Paul Giamatti Rhino in Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Long time friend of the show, Paul Giamatti there.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, I don't even remember, we sort of span off there if I said how many films we did in the disavowed list.
No, we were talking about it because we talked about Art of War.
Right.
And, Eye of the Beholder, I truly think is perhaps the worst movie we've tackled on Spy Hards.
I don't know. I don't know if it's the worst. I'd be keen to hear everyone else's thoughts on that. I mean, looking at the disavowed list in front of me right now, there are many films I'd rather watch instead of that, but Trenchcoat is not necessarily one of them.
Oh, that's a good call. Trenchcoat was really dire.
And maybe one of our spies is missing. No, sorry. One of our dinosaurs is missing. Ironically, both the Is Missing films are on the disavowed list.
Yeah, I expected a little more blowback about us putting the 4th Man from U.N.C.L.E. film on there, but it was pretty quiet.
Oh, there was blowback on Facebook.
Was there? Oh, I didn't see that.
In the Man from U.N.C.L.E. groups, they did not like our take.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
They would all say it was the worst Uncle film, but it's not bad. I'm like, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like someone turning up and saying Star Trek V is the worst Star Trek film, but it is. But like, who are you to say that?
Sure. I think one of our spies is missing, though, fundamentally doesn't work as a movie, and that's a big problem. And so, if it doesn't work as a movie, then you have to, I think, set the low bar. And the lowest bar you can hit is, the disavowed list.
It is, certainly, and because we say so, therefore it is. And I didn't mention this last year in terms of statistics, but I don't have the numbers for last year, but do you have any idea how many interviews we did this year?
Not a clue. It's got to be like maybe 2021.
Oh my God, you got it.
Did I really? I totally guessed.
Nail on
I
the head.
I took the number of episodes a year, split it in half roughly. I took a few off, and then yeah.
Well, we're going to come back to interviews when we talk about some of our favorite moments when we get to our big category section coming slightly later in the episode. But I thought I'd write them all down because I think we should take a moment to just sort of celebrate the fact that we did 21 interviews this year. The engine that could, Spy Hard's podcast. Here is the full list of people we spoke to in order of release. Brannon Braga, Mitchell Lieb, Jeff Kleeman, Dave Thomas, Luciano Paluzzi, Tom O'Connor, Dominic Cook, VJ Amritraj, Arthur Anderson, Lawrence Lasker, Ashley E. Miller, Lana Wood, Damian Lewis, Adrian Ascoria, Greg Smers, Ilya Volok, John Walsh, Norman Wanstall, David Henry Huang, John Burlingham, and Timothy Dowling.
Wow, that is a murderer's row of interview guests. And you know what? Ultimately, we owe it all to a man named Nicholas Meyer, who wrote and directed Star Trek II and Star Trek VI, and was the first interview we ever had on this show and helped pave the way for the bounty of riches that I never expected.
Yeah, and to be fair, we've gone on to meet a couple of those people this year at certain events and spoken to them about it. I had a long chat with Brannon Braga, who co-wrote Mission Impossible 2, also spent a long time of his life writing on Star Trek, so yeah, we had a good chat about that, and it's weird that we get to have these opportunities still, and I love that you all love the interviews at home. We've got some things already cooking for 2025, some things already cooked.
Yeah.
And as far as looking at this list, I think for us the sky's the limit.
Yeah, I mean, I've given up trying to figure out where it stops. Because I just wouldn't have dreamed of a lot of the interview guests we had this year, like the, Jeff Kleeman interview, which I'm sure we'll talk about more later.
Yeah.
Really was just like a revelation to have someone like that on the show who's giving us so many inside looks at information that I never knew.
Yeah.
And that interview got a lot of traction, and I just wouldn't have ever dreamed I'd be in the position to help lead to that information getting out there.
Yeah. We'll probably come back to talk about Jeff, but some of the lesser known ones, and I don't say lesser known in terms of their career, I just mean didn't get as much chatter, but like Greg Smers, who was the stunt coordinator on Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, the guy designed the Burj Khalifa sequence, and he spent an hour and a half with us breaking that down. If you haven't heard that interview and you like Ghost Protocol, go back and listen to that, because don't worry about our review. That is a wealth of knowledge, and I have to pinch myself when people say yes to us in emails. And there's been a few that have said yes to us this year that got away, that still bug me, that I'll keep trying for. And, it is a slog getting some of these people on, but ultimately I've never walked out of an interview disappointed.
No, and I love the ones that give us like the kind of the ultimate behind the scenes guide as to what happened. And another interview I think of, you mentioned Greg Smers, which was a great one. I mean, I often feel like I'm an audience member when I'm taking part in these interviews, because just the wealth of stories and information that's coming forward, all I can do is basically help continue it. And that's ultimately what my goal is, because it's usually riveting right from the start, and I'm just trying to carry it through to the end and, ask the right questions that lead to the great answers. But, I thought of Ashley E. Miller as well when we talked about X-Men First Class.
Invaluable.
Yeah, like the look we got at that movie and its various permutations, characters who popped in and out of the screenplay at various stages. That's the kind of information I'm always chasing.
Yeah, because ultimately we're film fans. And most of you at home, I'd like to think, are film fans too, and you want to know some of the things that happen behind the scenes. It's all well and good talking to the actors, and we love doing it. We spoke to Luciano Paluzzi and Lana Wood this year. Mind blowing, just saying that in a sentence. But I'll pick a name out of that. David Henry Huang, who wrote the play and Butterfly and the screenplay for the film. That interview will sit now in perpetuity on all of your podcast players, and it is the definitive story on how that screenplay came to be.
Not just the screenplay, but also the play.
Yeah.
And so I think that's just a fantastic interview to have in our catalog. And he was a incredibly gracious and thoughtful guest on the show.
Absolutely. But This is the moment you've all been waiting for, folks. We sent up the bat signal. We put the call out, or maybe it's the condor signal.
It has to be the condor signal.
It has to be the condor signal. Yes. We put that out about a month ago, asking for your voicemails to send in your favorite moments, and we're going to go through our categories now. We talk about favorite movies, everything like that, and in between those moments, we're going to have your voicemails in there as well. So, Cam, I think without further ado, why don't we just queue up the first voicemail?
First message.
Greetings, Spyhards. This is Eddie Coulter from Cave Spring, Georgia. I have to say my favorite episode had to be y'all's coverage of the movie Possession, because that was the last thing I ever expected to be covered at all. It was something different. That's a movie I saw when I was 12 that scarred me for a long time, but did make me a Sam Neill fan. Keep up the good work. Looking forward to see what you bring in 2025. Thanks.
Thank you, Eddie, for that wonderful voicemail. And, you say Possession was the last thing you ever expected. Well, the first thing we're talking about is the biggest surprise of 2024.
Yeah, and just in regards to what Eddie was saying, Possession being a movie he never expected to hear on the podcast, going forward, we never did this in the past, but we wanted to do like a Halloween episode, and the number of horror spy films is fairly limited. There's a few, but I think when it comes to Halloween going forward, you're not going to see a lot of traditional, Dracula spy movies. It's going to be like kind of crazy body horror films, which seem for whatever reason to tiptoe into the spy genre more than you'd think. And so our Halloween episodes may be really strange going forward.
Well, I hope so, because, Possession made quite an impact on the listeners. We got a lot of mail about that. We still do. One of our bigger episodes of the year as well. And, we're going to pick our biggest surprises. And I mean, for me, Cam, it is Possession.
Yeah, it was my choice as well. I don't know that there was anything else I could have picked for this category.
No, I did sort of toy with a couple of other films, but I had heard some things about Possession, but I didn't know much about it, so I was a bit hesitant going into it, knowing it was a horror film. That's not really my genre. But I was blown away not only by the visuals of the film, but just how much I was invested in it.
Yeah, I felt the same way, and the thing is, I went into it expecting maybe like an 80s horror film. Not like in a campy or kind of Friday the 13th kind of way, but more in like, okay, like I watched a lot of horror. I know what to mostly expect from like an 80s possession kind of film.
Sure.
I was thinking of something like maybe The Changeling with George C. Scott, which is a really good horror film, but it's not going to torment you the way that a movie like Possession does. And I was really caught off guard in terms of it being incredibly artistic and interesting, thematically rich. There was so much to dive into with Possession. We had a great conversation with Phil Nobile Jr. about that particular film, and it's a movie I could see myself going back to because of just how rich it is, in the way that I love David Lynch films, and they're often horrific to see. He has a lot of nightmarish imagery that sticks with you, but there's something about it that keeps pulling you back, and you don't expect to stumble across a movie like Possession doing a spy movie podcast, but here we are.
And, if the topic in this section is biggest surprise, I think also one of the surprises was just how on board you all were in us tackling that film. There was a couple of people that weren't a big fan of it, which I completely understand. It's certainly off of the beaten track. But for the most part, I think you all got on board with this sort of unique angle on a spy film, because I think it is arguably still a spy film. And I think it's one of those episodes people are going to go back to as well.
Did you have anything that came close, or maybe didn't come close, but like something else you considered?
I don't think I actually did. I think I read this list and I immediately thought of Possession.
Yeah, I was pretty 99.9% on board for Possession being the pick. The only one that gave me a second of pause was Our Man in Havana with Alec Guinness.
Right. Okay.
Which I thought was just a really engaging, entertaining, often very wry look at espionage.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's hard to do spy comedy. We've seen that time and time again. My Spy 2. But a movie like Our Man in Havana isn't necessarily like a laugh riot, but it's very funny and very satirical. And I thought walked that line really well. And it wasn't a movie that I had a lot of awareness of before tackling it on the show. So that was kind of like my in small font pick. But Possession loomed real large.
I could give you one if I had one to say. I just don't think there was anything that came anywhere close to Possession. But hey, we'll be keeping track of this as we go along through all these categories, folks. If you have a suggestion for your biggest surprise of our catalogue over the year, we want to hear from you. We'll be posting all about these categories on social media throughout the week as well. We want to hear your biggest surprises from our 2024 collection.
Yeah, and I think it's always fun when people are online talking about like the big surprise spy movies we tackled in a year.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also just as enthusiastic about hearing about some of the movies they maybe didn't like as much. But before we talk about that, I think that cues us up for the next voicemail.
Next message.
Hi all, this is Monty Dom32 on Twitter. Probably the best moment in the last 12 months has to be Cam's spectacular Scottish accent. I don't think... I mean, it's not bad, but it's up there with Christoph Lambert. So here's to 2025, and hopefully Cam can do a better impression. Cheers, guys.
Well, Scott, I think Monty summed up the horror of my Scottish accent pretty well. I think we could have used that voicemail to lead into, perhaps discussion of Possession, a movie that also sticks with you in terms of its horror, but
or regrettable choices.
Regrettable choices, yes. But instead, we are going to use that as a segue into the movie we most dreaded watching or rewatching for the podcast. Now, dread being the operative word, because I think anyone would dread going back and listening to me do a Scottish accent ever again.
And, you all at home don't have to hear the 30-minute cut of Cam trying to do that. And I know Cam knew he had to do that recording and was definitely dreading it leading into the event. So I think this is the perfect segue. And Monty, thank you for your voicemail.
Yes, and so, yes, no one wants to go back to that voicemail. So let's move forward into 2025 and brighter days ahead. But, Scott, not every movie is a joy to watch for the podcast. Sometimes you're caught off guard. Like Eye of the Beholder, which we hated. We'd never seen it, so we didn't, really go into that one feeling this great pit in our stomach. But for you, what was the movie you most dreaded watching for the podcast this year?
Much like the last segment, this was an easy one because it has a history to it.
Okay.
You and I saw the trailer for this film together in the middle of the Las Vegas Strip back in 2023. And I remember looking over at you and just going like, oh boy, this is going to be bad. And I didn't verbalize it, but like you met me on like an energy level and we just bounced off that sort of, oh boy, this isn't going to be good. And it wasn't. And we actually covered it very briefly on the Patreon in 2023, but we thought, hey, let's give it a proper review in 2024. And that is Heart of Stone.
Well, as I recall, like you and Daisy actually were pretty positive on that movie on the revisit. I was the one that was the stick in the mud.
I mean, Cam, it was very early in the year 2024. I could have had a cold. I could have been high on medication or something like that. I just remember a sinking feeling in my stomach before I hit play. And as far as dreaded watching goes, I think that ticks the box.
Yeah, that also ticked my box as well, Heart of Stone.
Aha.
And it wouldn't be my answer if I hadn't seen it before.
Right, sure. Yeah.
It was the fact we were going back, and I don't remember why we were going back to it.
We covered it on the Patreon. We did those little wrap-up episodes every month, and we both watched it. Because also, it was kind of like a big spy movie that came out, and that, in the years of us podcasting, haven't been that many spy movies that have come out. It's usually about 3 or 4 a year. So me and you do generally find a reason to go and watch them when they come out. We just don't always tackle them straight away.
Underreported story, actually, it felt like this year there was fewer like big spy movies coming out for us to tackle. Like
Definitely.
We didn't really do any episodes of the Declassified series.
Argyle was the only one.
Yeah, and so that was kind of a rarity. we did tackle The Union pretty quickly after its release, and no one noticed. But
We'll come back to that.
yeah. Heart of Stone was one that, like, had I not seen it, wouldn't have cared. But going back to Heart of Stone was a grim experience for me. I remember just, like, sitting there going, oh, God, I've got to use my night off to watch Heart of Stone for the second time. There was no competition there, and I didn't have a particularly pleasant experience with it either time. The only movie that I considered actually putting here instead, for different reasons actually, was Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Because as I talked about in the first go around, I didn't connect with the movie fully. I didn't dislike it in any strong way the first time I saw it in theaters, but I didn't connect to it. And I was nervous going back of, like, if I had the same experience the second time and felt just kind of like very blah on the movie, like, how good an episode of the podcast does that lead to? And so, had that been the case, I would have totally come into that episode and said the same thing. I would have said, like, this movie didn't work for me for, X, Y, and Z reasons. But I just found, like, it was a very different experience for me. And maybe that's coming from, 13 years since the last viewing, and a lot more familiarity and love for the spy genre building up over time.
Yeah, and I think in terms of my closest to taking the spot for this one, much as I think Heart of Stone was the easy answer, is actually the 1943 film They Got Me Covered with Bob Hope. Because Bob Hope is like rubbing poison ivy directly in my eyes.
I thought you might pick this one, actually.
I went into it now just thinking, I just don't want to watch a Bob Hope film. And luckily, he did make me laugh a couple of times. Because it was a bit more of a younger Bob Hope than what we'd witnessed before. It's just a bit more of an energy to it. But, yeah, I was dreading watching that because Bob Hope just does not work for me.
Yeah, my thing with They Got Me Covered was, it was fine enough, I guess. But I also feel like by the time we get to the end of this podcast and have covered multiple Bob Hope movies, I'll have a very difficult time keeping any of them straight in my mind.
I got really sad when you said there was more Bob Hope movies coming.
Call Me Buana, my favorite blonde. There's a couple more at least.
Galga, no. Thanks.
Scott is running to Peter Sellers right now.
Oh, take me. I'll burn with you, buddy. Please don't make me watch Bob Hope or Gal Gadot ever again. I'll be right with you.
But you get down there and there's like a movie theater and only one movie's ever playing and it's a Bob Hope film.
I thought you were going to say Ishtar, but yeah, that works too.
The worst Bob Hope film. I don't know what that would be, but that's what they're showing.
That could be the case. Let us know what your most dreaded episode to listen to perhaps this year. I'd be curious to hear that because you've probably all watching the films along with us as we go through them. Maybe there was one you were just like, I can't bring myself to rewatch this film, and sorry boys, I just can't do it. I'll be interested to find out, but I think it's time for that next voicemail.
Next message.
Hello, this is Bill Koenig with the Spy Command blog and the still new 007 Files podcast. I'm just going to say, I'm going to cheat a little and say I was happy that Spy Hearts chose to recognize the Uncle movies. These are feature films that were re-edited from the TV show that it oftentimes included new footage. If I'm pressing for a favorite, it'd be the one I was on where I got a chance to talk about Ian Fleming's involvement with Uncle, which gets often overlooked. So anyway, there you go. Thanks very much for asking, and take care, everyone.
The Spy Commander himself makes another appearance on the show. Bill Koenig, thank you for your voicemail. Happy New Year to you. He mentions the Man from Uncle films, which we tackled the first 4 in the year 2024. There's still another 4 to go, which we'll be looking at next year. And they have some very, very crazy moments in them. And this next category happens to be the craziest scene of the year. Cam, what blew your mind?
So I might have picked an Uncle moment had I not watched the movie Possession in 2024. And so, how do you look at any other scene than Isabella Johnny having like almost like an alien miscarriage
Oh,
in a subway tunnel?
you picked that scene.
I did. What did you pick?
Oh my god. Well, I picked Possession,
Uh-huh.
and originally I wrote down the subway scene, but then I realized this film features Isabella Adjani humping a tentacled physical manifestation of her own guilt. And I'm like, how could that not make the craziest spy movie scene of the year?
I mean, I went with the subway tunnel because it was so visceral and I will never get it out of my head. And the way it just kept building and building and building and was very prolonged to an almost torturous degree. I mean, it's a masterfully directed sequence and
Yeah.
masterfully acted, but it is so intense and boy, does that like just dig into your brain. Believe me, I did think about the tentacle sex scene, but
Of course you did.
of course I did. But there was just something about that subway tunnel that I just was like, no, I don't think I'll see anything else like that. Whereas who knows what kind of tentacle sex will happen in future spy movies that I might see.
One can only hope we get some more Big O and his red pulsating laser action, something like that. But there's a moment in the tentacle sex scene in Possession where she turns to, there's a man in the room, I can't remember who it is, and she goes, "He's almost done." I'm like, brother, so am I. Like, what is this nonsense? But like, it's crazy, and the definition is craziest scene. I mean, having a breakdown slash metaphorical miscarriage, perhaps, which is I don't like throwing that word around in a jovial way, and that's kind of what that scene is in the subway.
Yeah.
But Isabella Johnny making groaning noises whilst humping on top of a prosthetic with some guy inside waving tentacles around. I mean, that's the magic of filmmaking right there.
Great film. Great
Actor.
film.
Possession's winning all the awards this year. Sam Neill, Isabella Johnny. Don't worry about the Palm d'Or or whatever it is you won for it. The Spy Hard's craziest scene of the year goes to you 40 years after you brought the film out.
Yeah, the only other thing that I made a small little note of that made me laugh really hard was in Eye of the Beholder. Was when Ashley Judd has a relationship with a blind man, and Ewan McGregor is trying to warn the blind man that she is deadly. She may kill him.
Sure.
So his way of doing so is to run at the guy, punch him in the face, and scream, "She's gonna kill you! She's gonna kill you!" and then run away.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how far I tuned out of that film by that point, but I remember just going, this is the worst way to do anything.
Yeah, that scene did jump out, and maybe would have been a contender in a different year, but this was the year of Possession on Spy Hards.
I think Possession is sweeping the Oscars, or our version of the Oscars, which is this episode.
Yeah. Anyways, let's get to the next voicemail.
Next message.
Hey guys, Vinny here. Just wanted to say your podcast is terrific and definitely a favourite of mine. I think one of my favourite moments from this year on your podcast was you guys talking about Possession, because I'll admit I was surprised when I saw that you'd reviewed it. I thought, oh, these guys usually just do spy stuff. And I was like, cool. And I was like, I'd totally forgotten some of the spy stuff that was actually in it. Also, it was entertaining listening to you guys try to describe some of the film, because it is such an out there film that like is rather strange and obscure and weird to put into words for other people. But yeah, as always, you guys are amazing, and I'm very happy to be a follower of your show and your content, and also want to say thank you for your wonderful friendship, because it is very much appreciated, guys.
Thank you very much for that voicemail, Vinny. And you note that you like when Spy Hards tackles strange and obscure films. You particularly mentioned Possession, a movie that obviously we have a lot of love for. But, you know, the hidden gems category that we do in these wraps is all about celebrating the movies we discovered that maybe people weren't talking about or weren't at least on the tip of anyone's tongue. And so, Scott, what was your hidden gem of 2024?
To find this, I had to travel all the way back to January.
Okay.
And it's a film that has made a special impact on my life. And I might come back to it later in the episode. I could not let a section go past like Hidden Gems without tipping my hat to the mystery man of the Balkans himself, Jan Tartu, in The Adventures of Tartu.
I knew you were going to pick this, and you had an experience fairly recently that might have, helped push things in the favor of Tartu.
Yeah, I think I'll come back to that later in terms of that experience. We can talk about it a little more. But yeah, I mean, to talk about The Adventures of Tartu, it's an early episode we tackled in this year, and it's one I don't know if we necessarily often say this on the show, a little behind the scenes here, but we refer to some of these older films as Spy Hards specials. I think we do say it on the show from time to time.
Yeah.
Yeah. This was very much a Spy Hard special. And when we define a Spy Hard special, it's basically a film from sort of the 30s, 40s, 50s that we think no one's ever heard of. A real, like, vault find, if you will. And we did our review on that. We had fun talking about it. We had fun reading the reviews and the taglines. That Mystery Man of the Balkans will never leave my head. And then you guys all listened to it in droves and loved hearing about Tartu. There are letterboxd.com reviews that mention they found Tartu through our episode.
Yeah.
Absolutely insane.
Yeah. I can't believe that Tartu has had such legs. But who knew? Like, that's a movie that definitely, when I reviewed it on the show, I wasn't as big a fan of it. But I just really thought, like, this is one that's just going to come out, do what it does in terms of downloads, and kind of be forgotten, like some of the other 1940s spy propaganda films we've done in the past.
Sure.
And I've been actually very amused at the life Tartu has had.
He lived quite a life, our Jan Tartu.
He did indeed. So I didn't choose Tartu, obviously, for my hidden gem. This was actually tough because I like to pick a movie that is really obscure and one that people just aren't talking about. And we actually covered a fair number of movies this year that I think people at least are aware of. Like, I would have considered, say, The Courier, but I think that movie has a pretty good reputation in, espionage cinema circles.
Sure.
So I ended up going with The Deadly Affair from 1966, which was
right.
Adapted from, I think, John le Carré's first Smiley novel. And it's a movie that I think is kind of forgotten because it has a quasi-Smiley. It's not actually Smiley by name, and it's played by James Mason, that character. I was really interested in the kind of the world of this movie. I think it did a great job having so much atmosphere, pulling you into a story, and it was also pretty invaluable for then jumping over at the end of the year to do Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. So I think a lot of people talk about the Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy miniseries, the Smiley's People miniseries, the Tinker Tailor movie, but no one really talks that much anymore about Deadly Affair, and I think that's kind of a shame.
Oh, and you'll also note that Jeff Quest joined us for both Deadly Affair and Tinker Tailor, so sort of helped us bookend the year, as it were. And I mean, much like your Tartu reaction, I wasn't as big a fan of the Deadly Affair. I think I have trouble resonating with George Smiley as a character. You're a bit of an Anglophile yourself, Cam, so maybe that's what brings you in. You enjoy all things England.
Do I?
Oh, well,
not all things.
Well, you love James
Not all
Bond.
things.
Well, okay. Yeah, that's true. But you love James Bond. And so, yeah, I don't know what it is. I can't put my finger on why George Smiley doesn't work for me. And that did bleed into a little bit of Tinker Tailor and The Deadly Affair. But, again, it's one of those episodes that we wasn't sure about the reaction to it. And it did really well. You guys really responded to it. I think mostly because John le Carré is a very famous spy author.
Yeah, and the only other movie that I considered was I Was a Spy with Madeleine Carroll from 1933, which was a movie that was not perfect. It didn't necessarily hold up spectacularly in some ways, but it's about an interesting figure in the world of real-life espionage, Marta Knockhart, who we've tackled a couple times on the show in terms of movies influenced by her or written by her as well in real life, and she was a real-life spy. And I Was a Spy, I thought, did a really good job of conveying like real world espionage, like in a way that is very unflashy. It involves, just hanging out even at like produce markets and concealing messages in the vegetables you're selling, things like that. And I really enjoyed that aspect of the movie. It was the love story that didn't hold up so well.
Sure. The only other ones that were sort of on the tip of my tongue for this was actually a double pairing of Scorpio and Killer Elite. both 1970s spy films are very much in the vibe of Parallax View or 3 Days of the Condor. Very downbeat
Pessimistic.
films, pessimistic. But they both are. I would say I loved them. They both had their flaws, but they are definitely hidden gems in the spy movie genre, I would say.
Yes, definitely.
Well, we've unearthed enough gems. Let's get another voicemail in our ears.
Next message.
Hello, this is Luna of Twitter here speaking. 2024 was an interesting year for the podcast in my opinion. There was many great episodes that you guys released, such as Lucina Paluzzi and VJ. But I think my favourite episode has to be the Sean Connery Roundtable, because it was a 3-hour epic tribute to the legend himself, who launched this era of spy movies that I dearly hold to my heart. Of course, bloody, there's many great moments to be had, but I want to take it back to the beginning of the year with The Adventures of Tartu and the Topple / Julian Glover feel when Glynis Johns passed away a few days before. Anyway, I'll let you guys off, so see ya later. Bye.
Thank you, Luna, for that wonderful voicemail. And, you're also a Tartu head, much like myself. And I put that down as a hidden gem, as a forgotten film in many ways. But our next segment takes a look at what we think was the most forgettable film we've tackled in the year 2024. And, I mean, by very definition, we should probably just forget the title of the film and have no answer for this. But Cam, do you have an answer?
Scott, I went down the list of movies we tackled in this year, and most of them I remember really well. But there was one I kept stumbling over, and that was Berlin Correspondent from 1942 with Dana Andrews and Virginia Gilmore. There's little bits that bounce around in my head, like the radio station where they were passaging messages. But I got to be honest with you, Berlin Correspondent, unlike, say, British Agent and some of these other generically named spy movies of the time, does not stick in my head. There's no Cole subplot to keep me on the edge of my seat like there was in that other one with, oh my God, I'm totally blanking on the name of that movie as well. There's so many, like, Confidential Agent, that's what that one was. But this movie, Berlin Correspondent, it just... I remember almost nothing that happened in it. Was there an insane asylum in that one? Or was that British intelligence?
I think that's British intelligence. I think.
Right? Like, the thing is, like, British intelligence I remember because you had Boris Karloff, an incredibly memorable performance. You had a bombing sequence at the end that was really impactful. But to me, like, just Berlin Correspondent, I don't think it was a terrible movie, but it's just vanished from my mind.
See, that was my initial answer. And... the problem is, when I think about Berlin Correspondent, I think about two things. Firstly, it's 60 minutes long, and I remember that. It moves at a clip.
Okay.
And I remember, like, the sort of cool concept of someone working as a fifth columnist selling secrets to the Nazis and taking out, like, shipments across the Atlantic.
Right.
So that sticks in my head. So, like, is it forgotten for me? No. But my pick is. And I question you to name anything that happened in this film. And that is 2024's The Union with Mark Wahlberg.
Oh, right.
Honestly, I cannot remember a single thing about that film.
Halle Berry's haircut. I'll never forget it.
Is that your pull?
No. There was also the tower in London where they had the base.
The BT Tower. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember the whole setup of it being the ex-girlfriend, and then reuniting years later, her pulling into the mission. I remember foot chases through the streets. I remember a lot of that movie. I did consider it because I think in the realms of straight-to-streaming espionage entertainment, of which we have had a very spotty track record, Heart of Stone included, I think this one is probably more generic than most, but there was enough for me to latch onto in my memory banks versus Berlin Correspondent.
And interestingly, I think it opens up a quick discussion about Netflix films or streaming films. Let's be more generic in that sense. There's a real disposability to them, and a lot of them seem to go down the spy movie sort of route.
Yeah.
And I'm beginning to wonder if we're losing it a little bit with spy films because, Heart of Stone, The Union, My Spy, none of these are heavy hitters. And frankly, there haven't been that many heavy hitters during the lifetime of this podcast. There haven't been that many heavy hitters released on at all, spy movie wise, but definitely on streaming.
I feel like I've noticed more so just a lack of enthusiasm for these movies because when The Gray Man came out,
Sure.
I didn't care for The Gray Man, but it had a lot of noise around it.
Yeah.
And clearly people were watching it from numbers, it seemed.
Uh-huh.
And so there was kind of more of a push. And then like Heart of Stone was kind of like the mid-tier one where you're like seeing a lot of trailers. We were seeing, as you said, in Vegas, like on the big billboards, they were showing the trailer for that movie. So it felt like there was noise around it. I don't recall anyone really mentioning it when it came out, but nonetheless, it seemed to have a bit of a splash in terms of release. But then when like The Union felt like it was just quietly dropped with very little fanfare, no one cares. I can say that when we put out that episode, the downloads for that one were not on par with, say, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy by any stretch of the imagination.
Certainly not.
That said, I will have also noticed over time the Union has actually picked up quite a bit. And so it seems like it's a movie that maybe people are watching on a boring night at home over, the various months since its release. But
hang on. Are they bored first, or does watching it make them bored?
Well, I can't answer that question. You'd have to interview them all independently. But it's clear that like these kind of straight to streaming spy movies, especially the action based ones, are not necessarily grabbing people the way that they maybe once did, or at least they thought they might.
I think it is sort of an easy in as a spy. Like as a viewing audience, we're sort of preconditioned for spy movies. We know a lot of the tropes. They haven't got to explain too much.
Yeah.
So for a lot of writers, it's low hanging fruit.
Yeah, totally.
But there's some things coming in 2025 that might be of interest. I just saw the trailer the other day for the Soderbergh film Black Bag. It looks quite good.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's Steven Soderbergh, so I would hope he would bring something very, unique and personal to what he'd be doing versus like The Union, which I don't know if there was a lot of unique or personal things going on with that one. But speaking of unique and personal, here's the next voicemail.
Next message.
Agent Zorlens here from Southeast Asia, hoping this message doesn't self-destruct before I finish recording. Let me start off by saying a massive thanks to our incredible hosts, Scott and Cam, for sharing their love of spy movies through their podcast. I truly appreciate the community that you've built that welcomes fans from all over and truly celebrates the spy genre. For my personal favorites of spy hards this 2024, I was delighted that we had not one, but 4 Mission Impossible movies covered. Then when it comes to Spy Hard's interviews, which is one of my personal favorites because of how much I learned from the behind the scenes, some very memorable ones for me would be David Henry Wong and the choices he made for the play versus the film versions of M. Butterfly, Mitchell Laib's adventures and misadventures for coming up with the music for Mission Impossible 2. Norman Wanstall and his process, his sharp precision for listening and creating as sound editor for multiple Bond films, and Ashley E. Miller's trials and triumphs with his drafts for X-Men First Class. I'm sure there's more I missed out on giving a shout, but I'll end by saying I really look forward to another year with my fellow Spyhard.
Well, thank you very much, Zora Lenz. It's always really powerful for me to hear people's experiences listening to the show, and I loved hearing about your love of our interviews and a lot of the unique and personal touches that the filmmakers brought to the projects they were working on. And I think there's a couple of those interviews that we're going to talk a little bit more about in the moments to come on this show. But I wanted to go back to the personal. And one of the things that I think is very personal on the show is regrets. And those moments on the show where we have to vote on a knock list or a disavowed list, and we make a call on the actual recording, and maybe later by the, perhaps end of the year, perhaps the end of the year episode, we think, I may have had it wrong. So this is what this category is for, regrettable choices. Scott, what was your regrettable choice for 2024?
This is the one category that I actually had to sort of ruminate on for a while.
Yeah.
I wrote this list a few days ago, and this was the only thing I left blank until literally hitting record. I wrote my answer in. Originally, I was going to go with a film that I think I should have maybe, lobbied for a bit more and got onto the knock list. And that would have been Our Man in Havana. I think there's a lot to that film. And also Possession, I think, was definitely up for a debate there as well, as something that maybe could have made it. And it obviously has made an impact on this episode, and all of you guys at home have written in about it or called in about it. But then I looked at the knock list, the 5 films that we've put on this year, and thought, am I happy with the 5 films? And there's one that jumped out to me that I just think, no, I'm not.
Okay.
And that's Allied.
Uh-huh.
I don't remember who voted what.
Oh, I do.
I haven't gone back to listen.
I will never forget.
Okay, so I'm assuming by that impression you were outvoted on Allied.
I was indeed, yeah.
Okay.
I voted no.
Right. I think that was a mistake on my part to put it on.
Okay.
I think I was swept away with the romanticism of the film. Anyway, I think I was just sort of taken away with that one. And I think in retrospect, in a more of a macro approach, looking at the knock list, that is clearly the standout of the 5 that maybe doesn't belong.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, Allied was a movie, I wasn't as big a fan of. I thought at the start of the year, early in the year, that I may be saying To Trap a Spy, but I gotta say I'm feeling pretty good about To Trap a Spy right now.
Yeah,
in
me
contrast
too.
to some of the other Man from U.N.C.L.E. films. That worked out okay. I think the only one that really jumped out to me, and I think actually Our Man in Havana is a good call. Maybe I should have pushed a little bit for that one. I don't know how I'll feel about that in the years to come, but I do think, maybe I should have. But the one that I wish I'd pushed harder on was putting My Spy 2 on the disavowed list.
Yeah.
I wish I had pushed a lot harder. I was very kind of dismissive, you don't think so? Okay, sounds good to me. Moving on. Whereas I think I should have been hold on, and underlined the case for why My Spy 2 belonged on the disavowed list, the same way we pushed One of Our Spies is Missing on that list. Because I really think My Spy 2 is about as lazy as it gets when it comes to this straight to streaming spy content. I would say The Union is a better movie than My Spy 2.
Oof. I don't think you're wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if we could do a take back, I would take Allied off the knock list, and I think I would agree with you and put My Spy 2 on a disavowed list.
Yeah, and I was very sick in that recording, as you could hear from listening to it last week. And so maybe that's why my wits were not about me.
I don't think I was particularly smitten with it either. I just don't. I think there was too many interesting elements for me to do it at the time. But if it had ended up on the disavowed list, I do not think I would be losing sleep.
Right. Yeah.
Much like Dave Bautista is not losing any sleep on the quality of the film whilst he's rolling in his millions.
No kidding.
Well, clearly Cam and I have some regrets this year, but we're not regretting these voicemails. Let's keep them coming. Play the next one.
Next message.
Hey guys, Happy New Year. Really enjoy your podcast. You had a great year in 2024. As always, you covered a good variety of films, which is why I keep listening and what I really enjoy. There have been a few that you've covered that I've added to my watch list. Sneakers stands out. I wasn't expecting much from that one, but after your review, I have to check that one out. I'm also going to check out Allied. I'm starting to really like the World War II era spy films, or the ones set in World War II. Some of the reviews that I've enjoyed most in the previous year, X-Men First Class was one, because I'm a big Marvel fan. I also enjoyed your Man from U.N.C.L.E. reviews. I've only seen a couple episodes of the show, but the first one, what I liked with both X-Men First Class and for that first Man from U.N.C.L.E. reviews, you had people on that were really familiar with the source material and were really fans, so that was fun. Some of your best interviews, I would say Jeff Kleeman, Luciano Paluzzi, and I really liked the recent one you did with John Burlingame. Blanked on his name. Anyway, thanks for all the content 2024. Look forward to the new year.
Bob Garrett, thank you for the voicemail. Happy New Year to you and yours. You mentioned your love of X-Men, and you mentioned your love of the Man from U.N.C.L.E. films we've been doing this year. And of course, the Man from U.N.C.L.E. films are taken from TV. And one thing we've been doing on our Patreon this year exclusively, and this is a new segment in this episode, we've been tackling spy TV shows and spy TV movies over on the Patreon, patreon.com/spyhards. There's a link in the show notes below. Thank you for the cheap plug. And so we thought we would take a look at what we've done over on the Patreon and decide what we think is the best spy TV or spy TV movie that we've tackled in the year 2024. Cam, what's your pick for the best?
So I think the best content we covered in terms of TV over on the Patreon this year was The Night Manager. Going back and looking at that John le Carre series with Tom Hiddleston, I had an absolute blast. And it was a great introduction for me to tackling spy TV, because we would do Slow Horses season 1 and 2 after that, as well as Killing Eve season 1. But The Night Manager is the high bar so far, and I'm very curious to see whether we can beat that one.
Yeah, it was a no-brainer for me as well. I think Night Manager is pretty perfect as far as adaptations go. And it's interesting that they've now announced the second and third season that's being worked on. I think shooting very soon. I think it is rolling on it. So I'm keen to see where that goes. But yeah, it's a complete slam dunk of a TV show. And, you know, we do something over on the Patreon called the Boss List, or the Best of the Small Screen. And that definitely made the Boss List. I think Tom Hiddleston and Hugh Laurie gave some absolutely masterful performances and very atypical performances for what we've seen in their career, especially Hugh Laurie, who's really been known for sort of comedy for most of his career, and of course Dr. House. I just can't fault it. I just think, like, if people are looking for a good spy TV show to watch, or like a mini series, which is what that was, I will always point them in the direction of The Night Manager.
I will say my favorite TV episode we did over on the Patreon was our review of the 1992 Lifetime film Notorious, where Scott professed his love for the lead Jenny Robertson, and I had a complete meltdown at a certain point.
That was definitely an interesting one to record and to watch. I loved the film Notorious, so I was very keen to see what a TV miniseries version of that would be, or a TV movie, I should say. And apart from my undying love for Jenny Robertson, who, yowzers, not much else to say about Notorious, unfortunately.
Although there was a lot to say in that episode, and it was also actually a blast covering the Remo Williams pilot, Remo Williams: The Prophecy.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot over there, but I think, and to be fair, we've done 2 seasons of Slow Horses as well, which is a fantastic TV show.
Yeah.
And you're always saying to us listeners that you want some spy TV. That's why we're doing it over on the Patreon. Go and check us out over there if you want to hear some more of that. It's good eating.
And also, Bob mentions he really enjoyed our X-Men First Class episode as well. And we are reviewing some of the X-Men movies over there as well. We have reviews for X-Men and X2, X-Men United. And I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility we wind up doing, say, X-Men Last Stand this year either. But I think that brings us to our next voicemail. Roll it.
Next message.
Hey Spy Hards, it's Kevin here from at Bond in Colour, also from the James Bond Club Ireland. I just wanted to take a moment to wish everybody very happy Christmas, season's greetings to all for the holidays. And in answer to the question, kind of favorite podcast, that's a really hard question to answer because there's been so much this year. But I do like probably the quieter moments, and a good example of that might have been the interview with Lana Wood, I think in the middle of the summer around then, which was talking about her role in Diamonds Are Forever and how it came about, and how the role of Plenty was a little bit more in detail perhaps than what we saw, and giving her insights in the casting process and getting involved and working with Sean Connery. New info that perhaps we didn't know, and there was certainly a lot in there. So that was one of the highlights. I think I would encourage anyone to go have a listen to that. But that's just a bit of gold dust amongst the whole gold mine of great stuff that you guys have done this year. So thank you. Between interviews with the Bond actors, we've covered Mission Impossible, we've gone into all manner of spy movies and TV series. It's been wonderful. So keep it up, keep going with it, and wish everybody, like I say, season's greetings, happy holidays to you all, and here's for everyone to have a happy and healthy 2025. See you on the other side.
Thank you very much, Kevin, or Bond in Color on social media. If you would like to connect with Kevin and talk spy movies, for your fond memories of the Lana Wood interview, which we had a great time with as well. And let me tell you, you haven't lived until Lana Wood has emailed you a photo of her standing inside a giant shark's jaw. That's a life moment I'll forever treasure. But you also mentioned how much you enjoyed us covering the Mission Impossible films. And that brings us nicely to our category, Favorite Movies. And so, Scott, what was your favorite movie we tackled in the year of 2024 on Spy Hards?
I mean, we're leaving sort of the jokey categories into sort of the big heavy hitters now. Our favorites, the best of the best. What was our best film of the 40 films we tackled in 2024? It's a toughie. It's a real toughie. And I toyed with a couple of films. I toyed with Ghost Protocol. I toyed with Sneakers, but they were both films I had issues with, or I had gripes about. And so I looked again at the list and I thought, what did I have the best experience, not only watching, but also reviewing?
Right.
What was like holistically the best experience? What was my favorite experience? And it had to be The Adventures of Tar 2.
Wow.
I'm kidding before I get your letters. No. It was Mission Impossible 3. We did a deep dive review with friend of the show, Scott Mantz, who is an absolute star. We spent some time with him in Las Vegas as well. What a guy. What an episode. I mean, Mission Impossible 3 is a bit of a... was a bit looked down upon in sort of the Mission Impossible oeuvre, the franchise itself. It's one of the lesser entries, at least to many people. And I think through our review, my experience of doing it, my experience of viewing it, it's really gone up in my estimations. And I think it really stands above the rest as being the most personal and character-driven Mission Impossible film they've ever done. And I almost long for those days now when it feels like the Mission Impossible films are just moving into this realm where it's like action set piece, plot point, action set piece, plot point. Almost as if AI or, the AI in the film had generated the film for them, unfortunately. And I just, there's something about Mission Impossible 3, man. It just gives me the fuzzies.
And of course, we will be tackling Final Reckoning, I'm sure probably in a debrief in the year of 2025. So you can look forward to that. But, for me, I actually picked a Mission Impossible film as well. It was Ghost Protocol.
Wow.
I think Ghost Protocol is, if we had tackled Mission Impossible 1 in this calendar year, I might have considered that. Probably would have picked that as my number 1 of the year. But I think Ghost Protocol is the best Mission Impossible movie we tackled this year. And it was interesting how I looked at the list, and it didn't feel like there was as many stone cold masterpieces this year versus other years. Like we had like Casino Royale one year, the Daniel Craig, debut. And it's like, how do you not pick Casino Royale? Or, we've had a few of those. We had North by Northwest the first year we did a podcast. And so I ended up going with Ghost Protocol because I think it really nails the set pieces, the storytelling, the character dynamics feel really well fleshed out. In terms of having a supporting cast. It's a movie that I think is just pure popcorn entertainment, done incredibly well. I did look at Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, which I did consider, but I felt like my quibbles with that one, in terms of underdeveloped side characters, impacts the movie a little more so in a way that holds it just back, just a little bit. I also considered Sneakers, but I have to face the facts at the end of the day that I would far rather be kicking off my shoes and watching a Mission Impossible movie, especially one like Ghost Protocol, than Sneakers on a, free night. I love Sneakers, but it's not at the level of entertainment for me that Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol is.
It's ironic that your metaphor involved kicking off your shoes.
I know, right? It all manages to work out. I live in chaos, but somehow things manage to just make it to the finish line.
Listeners at home, you get a smooth listening experience. You do not see the fires we are putting out daily when we're putting together this show. And I'm always thankful to Cam for making it seem so easy.
That's right. I do what I can.
He does. He really, really does. But, Mission Impossible 3 and Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol has clearly been a mission year for Spy Hards for our favorite movie. But we've got more voicemails and more segments to go, so let's roll another one.
Next message.
Hello, Scott and Cam. This is Calvin Dyson here, just leaving you a quick voicemail just to say congratulations on another phenomenal year of podcasting. And thank you for another phenomenal year of podcasting, because you make my commutes so much more bearable with your regular outputs. So I appreciate it. Thank you. The Jeff Kleeman interview that you guys did is up there with just my favorite, not just like my favorite podcast from you guys this year, but my favorite Bond podcasts like ever. Like, that interview was phenomenal. And on paper, it shouldn't be as, we're going to interview the studio executive. It's not quite as sexy sounding as we're going to interview the stars, we're going to interview the actors, though I have loved many of the interviews you've done with the stars and actors this year as well. But the Jeff Kleeman interview was so insightful. So it's not very often that we hear from studio executives, quite frankly, and their positions and the oversight of these films. So I thought that the level of information and insight that you got out of Jeff in that was just next level, just phenomenal. I loved that podcast so much. And I'm running out of time, but I'm going to be very quick and say I also really loved your Argyle review episode, because the interview with Matthew Vaughn was pretty cool as well, but also because when I came out of the cinema after seeing that film, I had no idea what I just watched. So I just frantically, what's the first podcast? Oh, Spy Hards have done it. Brilliant. So thank you very much.
Thank you to Mr. Calvin Dyson himself, who has graced us once again on the podcast to give us his voicemail and his thoughts on his favourite moments from 2024. And I note that they all tie into interviews, which I think leads us to another question, Cam. Favourite interview? I mentioned before we did 21 interviews in this year. You have to pick your favourite. And there's a couple of ones that might just, it could be your choice, it might be low-hanging fruit, really depends on your output and sort of what you're looking for in an interview. So I'm really curious to hear from you, Cam. What's your pick for favourite interview of 2024?
This was torture. This was really torturous this year. And we had so many of the kinds of interviews that I aspire to, which are these behind-the-scenes looks that I think are wonderfully guided, and they can be in a really technical sense. Calvin Dyson mentioned, Jeff Kleeman, who just gave us all the ins and outs of what was going on with the early Pierce Brosnan Bond films, the first three.
Yeah.
And then you
invaluable
stuff. You can also look at, say, Lana Wood, who was a really candid, fun, and funny storyteller, and just gave us all her experience of Diamonds Are Forever. And you wouldn't necessarily look at those two things as being the same, but they're both giving us that really inside look at something in a way that is very involving and just entertaining to listen to. Look, Jeff Kleeman is, to me, like a carved in stone all-time Spy Hards interview. I think it's the answer, but I want to show love to another interview.
Sure.
So I think I'm going to make basically Jeff Kleeman the people's choice, because clearly the people have spoken and they love that interview. I want to just shine a little spotlight on Mitchell Lieb.
Yeah.
Who worked for Disney and produced soundtracks for many decades, was a really important figure in the history of film soundtracks. And he came on the show, and I mentioned earlier feeling like an audience member. That's my goal, is to basically be like, oh, I want more of this, give us more of these kinds of stories so I can be entertained. And that's kind of my job, to be basically that kind of conduit. Mitchell Lieb, I mean, this man, what a storyteller. And I was just enraptured by, the stories he was spinning. I think I asked like one or two questions in that whole episode. I didn't need to even do much because he gave us so much. And I was just on the edge of my seat. I was laughing. I was completely like mesmerized by his stories, which could be hilarious. They could be absurd in terms of the world of entertainment, like just the kinds of stories that you just can't believe. But every second of it was riveting, and I think Mitchell Lieb was a fantastic get for the show, and I hope to have him back on maybe when we tackle Austin Powers or something.
Yeah, the door is always open for Mitchell Lieb. I mean, the guy comes on the show, talks for 2 hours, drops bombs on basically everyone he's worked with, in like funny ways and in not so funny ways. I mean, the guy's trashing like Fred Durst and Limp Bizkit, and I'm just like, yes, inject this into my veins, please.
Yeah, it was great stuff.
I mean, candid is it's kind of one of the things we look for in these interviews is people to be candid, and you'll note a lot of the times we don't interview people from like recent films.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these days, people are signing NDAs and they have to just sort of go into these interviews and just sort of say how much fun they have working with it and everyone is a star and blah, 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 blah. People who worked on older films, not even that far back, like the early 2000s, are just more candid. They're willing to tell the stories. They're willing to tell you where the bodies are buried a lot of the time, to spill the tea. And Mitchell Lieb is a fantastic example. And on the other side of that, Calvin mentioned Argyle, and one of my interesting, and we're going to get to highlights in a minute. One of my highlights of the year was actually going to interview Matthew Vaughn in person as part of the press tour for that. I got to do an in-person interview for the first time ever. But part of that, I mean, it was only like 15 minutes we had with him, and he gave some interesting and insightful answers. And clearly, is a fan of the spy movie genre, and I feel like he had more to say, which would have had more time. I think we could have got more, but a lot of it is like the stock answers to questions he's had about Argyle.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no way of escaping the orbit of that. The gravitational pull, you just can't get away from it. So, like, Mitchell Lieb is a great example, and Jeff Kleeman again is the people's choice, and so I'm not going to choose that either. But you mentioned my choice, and that is Plenty O'Toole herself, Miss Lana Wood.
Mm-hmm.
Part of my choice of picking my favorite interview is also the process in which we do it. And I can't think of many people that have made it more warm and inviting than Lana Wood. Interestingly, Luciana Paluzzi was a lot of the same.
Yeah.
Bubbly, warm, caring, open, kind, compassionate. But the reason I went for Lana is twofold. One, she really did give us a sort of the bells and whistles, the behind-the-scenes tour of how Diamonds Are Forever was put together, or at least her involvement in the film. And in such a passionate, fun, and bubbly way. Like, if you've not checked out that Lana Wood interview and you like Bond, just go to that now. It is worth your time. But there's a segment later on in the episode where she talks about her sister.
Yeah.
Natalie Wood, who tragically died very young. And it took me back to an interview we did many years ago with a chap called Wendell Wellman, who wrote Firefox. And somewhere along that interview, it took sort of a sad turn, and it got quite emotional. And I remember just thinking to myself, look, I'm just a nerd in London who likes spy movies. And for a second, I made a human connection with someone, and I think the listeners did too. And I felt the same way talking to Lana. She was bearing her soul for those sort of 5 minutes, talking about the loss of her sister. And she felt she was safe enough in our presence to expose herself in that way. And that makes me feel good. That makes me feel like we've achieved something. And I all the jokes are fun, and the stories of Sean Connery are fun, but ultimately, like, that could be very much like an exchange, transactional.
Mm-hmm.
But when she opens up about that, it means something more to me. And that will never not hit me in the emotional section, And I thank Lana for feeling open and safe with us, that she could share that. And I hope that we gave her back what she needed in that moment, whether that was just listening or talking to her. And yeah, so was it our best interview? No, that's probably Jeff Kleeman. Was it my favorite? Yes.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's something that, like, listeners tune into those interviews, I think mostly because they want to know the behind the scenes on these movies they love. But every now and again, whether through just circumstance of the day or the moment,
sure,
or just because of the connection between us and the person we're talking to, you get those human moments that I think kind of elevate that interview and give the audience something else, like a more of a connection to the people involved in the movies they care about, beyond more of the really interesting behind the scenes details. And I think like that Lana Wood one is a great example. Wendell Wellman as well. We've had a handful of those moments on the show, but they're few and far between, and I think rightfully worth celebrating.
Yeah, I mean, you go back to the Matthew Vaughn one for a second. There wasn't a human moment in that.
Sure.
Very exciting for me to do that, sure. But like, And also like great for the show. We're talking to Matthew Vaughn, big spy director, good stuff. But when we stop this show in 10 years time or whatever, or me and you move on or whatever happens, I'll think about Lana and Wendell.
And I also think of Rachel Grant, who came on to talk about playing Peaceful Fountains of Desire in Die Another Day. There was some moments there as well. Or Barbara Feldon, who came on to talk about her book and working on Get Smart, another great interview. So, yeah, those kind of interviews do hold a special place for me as well. Okay, and speaking of special moments, let's get to our next voicemail.
Next message.
Hello, Michael Kenyon here. I've been listening to Spy Hards for a couple of years. I came for the Bond discussions, but I stayed for the Scott and Cam bromance. Hearing you two Bond brothers bicker about Bond songs recently was a lot of fun, as was the accompanying episode with John Burlingame. And I have loved revisiting the Man from U.N.C.L.E. movies with you this year, chaps. That's been great, but my absolute highlight has to be an interview. It was quite the coup for you guys to interview Jeff Kleeman, and you did not fumble the ball when you received it. I think that's a sports metaphor. I imagine AJ Chowdhury and all the Bond historians were reaching for their notebooks as the revelations about the Brosnan era kept on coming. So, congrats, Agent Scott and Cam the Provocateur, for another excellent year. And remember, everyone, if you are going to spy, spy hard.
Thank you very much, Michael Kenyon, for that voicemail. And we're really glad you enjoyed our Bond song discussion, because that was actually a bit of a trial for the future. We look to do more episodes like that where we can make our personal picks and really reveal them to the audience for judgment or praise, either way. But I think that brings us now to a category where we can also reveal some personal picks for praise or for judgment, and that is the highlight of the year on the show. Scott, this is always a tough one because we have so many moments. You just mentioned right there a very personal moment with Lana Wood. We've, over the course of this episode, mentioned other moments. But what was your highlight of the year?
I did struggle for this one because 2024 has been an interesting year. There's been some highs and there's definitely been some low moments, mostly to do with having colds. But, I mentioned The Adventures of Tar-2 earlier, and to bring that full circle, I got to go and see The Adventures of Tar-2 on the big screen at the South Bank BFI. I got to speak to the lady who helped introduce the film as well. She actually listened to our episode as part of her preparation for it, without knowing that we're a thing. She just found that because we're the only person that's ever reviewed that film online. So that was bizarre. But I think the moment for me that really sort of brought it all home was being asked by Mark Altman of the Inglorious Trexperts to be part of the Star Trek Las Vegas convention in the summer where we did our first live shows.
Yeah.
Specifically, we interviewed basically the brain trust from Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Ronald D. Moore, Ira Stephen Bear, and Robert Hewitt Wolf, who all made the Our Man Bashir episode, the spy spoof episode, if you will, of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. And I know a lot of people listening get sick of us mentioning Star Trek or just sort of like tune it out. But it is the thing that brought Cam and I together. That convention brought Cam and I together. It's the reason this show exists. So this spy movie show that you, I hope, love does have a foot in Star Trek because it made it happen. And being asked to go back to that show after many years of attending and actually present panels was a real, like, a pat on the back achievement moment for me, because it felt like we've been recognized for something that we've been doing. And I got to, with you, interview these people behind one of my favorite TV shows of all time, and then got to hear you come out with one of the greatest ad-libs of all time when trying to make up a sequel episode title where you came up with Quarktopussy. It baffles me how you came up with that so quickly, and I'll forever tip my hat to you on that one.
Right. Yeah, there were some things where we were like, let's just do a scene of like Garrick and Bashir doing a little bit of this thing again, and just like as a way to enter an episode or as a little bit in an episode, or
just come out of the holosuite in tuxedos.
In the tuxedos, and even
that's what I don't understand. Why
It had to be because of the MGM.
Oh, it was
thing.
100%.
Because otherwise, we definitely would have had him come out in the tuxedos talking, smack about something that happened.
I'm
but
sure.
nothing.
We were
zilch.
specifically told not to do that. I believe.
We really got shut down hard. I mean, hard, because usually we would have pushed back.
Yeah.
And be the brats of the franchise, but we didn't even try. So it must have been really like, you're done.
I remember that there was definitely when we talked about doing it again, I think is when we heard that we had been very naughty and we should not do that.
Because I can only imagine how Vic Fontaine would have fit into that world, for example.
But yeah, you bet. It would have been a lot of fun.
And maybe even the title Corktopusy. Yeah. Just pitching it.
MGM will be contacting you very soon.
Yeah. It wouldn't be the first time.
That was definitely a very fun moment for me as well, but also a little nerve-wracking because you're like, if I drop this and it just falls on deaf ears, then oh boy, am I in trouble.
Yeah, what crowd is that? Is it not a Bond crowd? And then Quarktopussy will not land. But if it was a James Bond crowd, they'd all understand it.
Yeah, exactly. So that one I was like, that was a little bit of a stressful moment, but I'm glad it it worked ultimately. That was just an incredible experience to have these Star Trek luminaries who I've watched, their episodes for years and years and years and see them at conventions, and then to be interviewing them was surreal. There's no other word. It was surreal.
And hanging out backstage as well. Hanging out backstage with other people,
Yes.
with creators of Star Trek, to sort of be part of that family, to feel like we're a bit closer to the talent than the viewer for a second. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, it was a unbelievable experience. I went with something though for my highlight that is maybe not as personal a moment, but was just something that blew me away and was the kind of insider story that I felt like there's nothing like this. I will never how did this happen in my life? How am I hearing this?
Okay.
It was Mitchell Lieb, going back to him again, telling the story, the meeting of the minds of Tom Cruise and Fred Durst.
I don't know what Tom's going to say, but let's go in. We go in, we sit down. Tom gives his best thing. This is such a positive thing. And I'm such a positive guy. And it's just this one lyric. It's just this one lyric that I just need you to change. And Fred goes, I hear you. I hear you. I appreciate everything you're saying. I'm not changing it. And Tom goes, wait, but you said you understand. Yeah, I do understand. And I understand where you're coming from. And I respect where you're coming from. I'm not changing it. This is a masterpiece. You don't ask Da Vinci to add more red. You don't ask Van Gogh to can you cover up some of the flowers? This is my art. Trust me on this.
That to me is a story I have recited to multiple people now who just frankly don't listen to me on Spy Hards. They would rather listen to something else other than me, and that's fine. And I'm talking about family and friends. But I have recited that Tom Cruise, Fred Durst story multiple times. And if there's any spy information I could ever hope to impart to the world before I join either Peter Sellers or Roger Moore, then it's that story, because my God, incredible stuff.
Yeah, that Mitchell Lieb interview is a wealth of knowledge, but I've just, there's not many times I wish I was a fly on the wall, but I wish I was a fly on the wall watching Tom Cruise and Fred Durst go mano a mano over some lyrical choices in Take a Look Around.
It's just one of those things where the way that Mitchell told that story, I can picture it.
Yeah.
I can picture the office. I can picture the two of them sitting there. It just created this whole little world that I'm so excited I was able to be introduced to.
Now I know why you want to hate me. What does that mean? They don't hate me. They love me. I would love to have seen that. Do you think he was wearing a red cap?
He had to have been, right? And I will never hear that song again in my life without thinking of that story.
Was Tom Cruise eating a tuna sandwich?
I feel like he wasn't. No. He's all business. He's all business in that meeting.
Also, he probably doesn't eat bread anymore, that guy. Look at him.
Yeah. Well, true enough.
Specimen.
Yeah.
Specimen. Well, we're getting to the end of the road now when it comes to these sections, but we've got some more voicemails, so why don't we queue up another one?
Next message.
Hello, Spyhards. Agent Pentix here, reporting for duty from Station YouTube. It's been another fantastic year of podcasts and interviews from you both, but I just wanted to highlight in particular your Spymaster interview with Jeff Kleeman in February. As you know, I'm an enormous James Bond fan, and that interview was probably one of the most revealing and in-depth insights into the filmmaking process for those movies that I've ever heard. You almost never hear people talk that openly and honestly about that sort of thing, especially not movie executives, and it's a credit to you both that you were able to get such a high-quality guest and to conduct such a revealing interview. Also, as a lifelong defender of Octopussy, I can't not mention your chat with Vijay Amritaj, one of Roger Moore's most memorable allies. Thanks for such an incredible year of podcasts, and also thanks for your cameo voiceovers in my video about the man with the golden gun. Like Quantum and Florists, it seems that the Spyhards team have people everywhere. Over and out.
Thank you for the voicemail, Pentext Productions, and thank you for involving us in your The Man with the Golden Gun video. Go and check that out on YouTube now, folks. We'll have a link in the show notes below. But you mention Jeff Kleeman. A lot of people mention Jeff Kleeman. And, you know, I think Jeff Kleeman is probably the people's MVP of the year of 2024. But we now have the difficult task of picking the Spyhards MVP of 2024. Last year, it was Dean Martin. We wrapped up the Matt Helm films last year. I wonder who might just take it this year. Cam, you've got the first vote.
I think this is actually a more difficult year than some of the others. Because Dean Martin, he owned last year for us. We couldn't stop talking about Dean Martin.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like this year was like a little more like just diverse in terms of the types of films we were tackling. There wasn't someone like Peter Lorre popping up in every third film. So this year I had two names. I think one I feel stronger about than the other. I think if I'm to vote like who I think it is, I think it's Tom Cruise for us tackling Mission Impossible 2, 3, and 4. We talked a lot about Tom Cruise. We had guests on, Greg Smers, who came on and talked all about Tom Cruise's process for creating the stunts of Ghost Protocol. We had a lot of interviews with people talking about their experiences working with Tom Cruise. We did not have Tom Cruise on the show yet. He will be joining Robert Redford for our Casino Royale 67 retrospective.
I mean, I want that to happen anyway. That just sounds fascinating.
Yes. The only other person that I thought was a consideration was Gary Oldman.
Interesting.
Who we loved in Tinker Tailor, and also we covered Slow Horses on the Patreon, but it's Patreon stuff versus the main feed, so I feel like it should be representative of what, everyone is hearing week to week, and I think it's Tom Cruise.
I mean, this really should be the MVS award for Most Valuable Spy, shouldn't it?
I mean, okay, so starting this year and moving into next, I guess?
Okay. It just came to me when I was thinking there. And I did toy with Gary Oldman. I also toyed with Robert Vaughn.
I did too.
But because Uncle is him and David McCallum, I can't split the vote. And I can't have both of them. And so then I looked at Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
And he ran into my life and shook me, jumped on my sofa, and told me I had to pick him. And you mentioned some of the interviews. I go back to Brandon Braga at the beginning of the year, who, he worked with his co-writer Ronald D. Moore, who we interviewed in Vegas, and Tom to do the original idea of Mission Impossible 2. He spoke a lot about working with Tom and what that's like, and some fascinating stories there. And I just think the most valuable person, if you're looking into behind the scenes, like of who attracted the most amount of people to the show, to who gave us the most interesting discussions, I picked for my favorite movie was MI3. You picked MI4. I think this year belongs to Tom Cruise.
Yeah, and we'll see about, the future where we tackle the other Mission Impossible films if we feel the same way those years, or is it, I think it's a one and done, right? Like once you get that title.
You can't have it again. So Peter Lorre, Tom Cruise, and Dean Martin are all retired now.
I think so. I don't think this is like the Academy Awards where you can win multiple years, but it may be harder in the future when we tackle the other Mission Impossible films, because I think, when you're talking about like Fallout and Rogue Nation and perhaps Final Reckoning, who knows, like it's hard not to champion Tom Cruise's efforts in those movies. But I think this year is like a strong year for Tom Cruise.
Well, Cam, it seems to me that the year 2024 belongs to Tom Cruise. He is officially our MVS of the year.
I suppose so, or at least going forward, that's what we'll call it, I guess.
Unless you write it and tell us otherwise, folks. And for all these sections, I'll be posting them online during the week. If you have different picks, we want to hear from you, or if you agree. We love it when you agree with us. And we're going to talk about the future in a second. What's coming up in 2025. We've got some teasers for you. But before we do that, we have one last present under the tree, and it's addressed to us from James Bond Club Ireland and 007?
Confusing. I guess we'll roll it and find out what it is.
Next message.
Hello, Spyhards. James Bond Club Ireland here. Congratulations on another great year of podcasts. We just couldn't make up our minds which episodes we enjoyed the most. The music of James Bond, the interview with Norman Wanstall, so many great movie reviews. There was just so much great content. But let's put it out there. Tim, Pierce, what did you think?
It's Tim Dalton here. I was bored the other day. Things were about to get nasty, but then I turned on Spy Hearts. I mean, it's the meanest, toughest, baddest podcast I've ever heard. You really get the contradiction and the colour of the podcast. Pierce here from the bogs of Ireland. You Spy Hearts people making magical content.
Merry Christmas, Spyhards from James Bond Club Ireland.
Merry Christmas, Spyhards from James Bond Club Ireland.
Happy Christmas, Spyhards, from all at James Bond Club Ireland.
Paul, Owen and the team, you've done it once again. What a voicemail. And thank you, of course, to Timothy Dalton and Pierce Brosnan, who have joined us here on Spyhards for the second time as well. It's nice to have you boys back on the show. I want to send our love, firstly, to James Bond Club Ireland for having me on a while back talking about spy movies with yourselves. And also, I wanted to just take a brief second to send my love to all of the people that are part of James Bond Club Ireland, because I know you've had a bit of a tough year. You know, one of your members, the founding members, John Lennon, Shauna Lennon, passed away this year, very tragically, and I had a brief chance to meet him, I think, at the end of last year, and such a warm and caring man, and I just think it came out of nowhere, and I know it hit you guys, and I just want to send love from myself and love from Cam, and I love the things you've been doing, and you've been pushing on, sharing and sending the James Bond love all over Ireland. I'm hoping to make it over there at some point in the next couple year, if I can, to one of your events to come and see you all. But we were thinking of you, and you're in our hearts, and that's all I really want to say on that.
And that was an amazing voicemail as well. I mean, I don't know if we'll ever have Pierce Brosnan or Timothy Dalton on the show, but I feel like we almost have as of this moment.
As close as perhaps we'll ever get to a 007, and frankly, I'll take it.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
But I teased some teasers, Cam. We're exiting 2024. This episode drops on New Year's Eve. I'm sure you're listening on New Year's Eve or New Year's Day. Perhaps you are hungover. You're laying on the sofa. You've got a cold flannel on your head. You're feeling low. Let's pick you up. I can tell you one thing that's going to happen in the year 2025. And that is a return of a certain number. A certain 007.
Oh, you don't say.
I think we're switching tracks back to Bond in the year 2025, and you'll note there's still the Dalton film, still the Moore films left to go. I wonder which one we're going to be tackling first.
Yeah, I mean, we've come off of the Craigs, which were very serious. Do we continue down the serious road, or do we lighten it up? I don't know.
I don't know either. I think the world might need a little bit of light these days. That might give you an inkling as to where we're heading next. And, you know, we've still got 4 more Uncle films to tackle, and we've been told we've passed the worst of them, so maybe it's all the way up from here. We'll find out. And one thing we haven't really spoken about is we did the Sean Connery roundtable this year. We don't tend to do the roundtables very often, maybe once a year. We'll have to start thinking about what we're going to do in 2025. Is it a Dean Martin roundtable? Or is it the Daniel Craig roundtable? Maybe we finally tackle that, or we haven't spoken about Daniel Craig in over a year now at this point.
Yeah, that's a good point as well. Just look at the list. We may also have some Denzel Washington content coming up in the future as well, because, he's at the top of the world right now with Gladiator 2, where he's an absolute ball.
He might need to equalize a few things for us.
Maybe. I don't know how that's relevant to the movie Safe House, but
oh yeah, you're quite
who
right.
knows?
I'm so
Don't
sorry.
confuse the listeners, Scott.
And we have one more tease, which I'll leave for a second because I want to say some thanks, pass some messages on. Firstly, I want to thank you, Cam. I've been through some interesting things over the last year. I've had some medical problems. I've had some mental health problems. I've had all kinds of problems. And you have been a rock consistently here for me every week. You've been adaptable and flexible when you needed to be, and you've never given me any pushback for any of the issues I've brought up. Not only that, but if I need you to change something for an interview time that changes, I need you to be flexible. You are that man. And you've got more things going on in your life than you've had in a long time. And I mean that in the best of ways. And you are still consistent. And I thank you for being one half of the show with me and making it as easy as possible to make Spy Hard's podcast for everyone else.
I mean, it's my pleasure, but also 2024 sucked. It did. Like, in a lot of ways personally. And, you talk about, how maybe like a section of the year was more difficult for you. The early sections of this year were terrible for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so you were doing the same thing for me. And so we really did balance it out. So yeah, 2024, personally, not my favorite year. Probably not your favorite year either. And so 2025 has to be better, right? Right?
Here's hoping it's more David Niven than Peter Sellers.
Yeah, and the latter couple months of 2024 have been, much, much, much better for me. And so I hope that that's 2025 for you.
And for everyone listening. And that is my other thank is to all of you for staying with us, for being here. I mean, we are consistently in your podcast feeds every Tuesday. We put a free episode at least out once a week, if not more. We don't ask for anything else. Just for you to listen, for you to talk to us online and share the episodes if you can. We have the Patreon, and we thank everyone who's joined us on there. And if you have the spare change in the year 2025, you want to come and join and get an extra dose of Spy Jinx every week, patreon.com/spyhards, but I won't push that down anymore. Thank you all for being on this journey with us. We've still got hundreds of films to go. We only did 40 in the last year. This is going to take us a very long time, and I love it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the upcoming list just to kick off the new year, and it's all over the place.
Yeah.
Which, in classic Spy Hards fashion, Scott teases Bond, but there's going to be all sorts of crazy things we're going to be doing week to week.
And speaking of what's coming up next, we teased it at the start. We just teased it a little bit there. We're wrapping up now. Cam, what are we doing next week?
Yes, we mentioned earlier that sneakers may be a element of the very near future on Spy Hards, and we are going to be joined by director and co-writer Phil Alden Robinson, who's going to come on the show and talk all about the creation of sneakers. He's also going to share stories about some of his past work, like, I don't know, Field of Dreams, perhaps. And so this is going to be a great interview. Plus, you're going to get some early Jack Ryan content. We haven't tackled Jack Ryan on the show very much, other than that Without Remorse, kind of spin-off film we did. But Phil Alden Robinson directed The Sum of All Fears. So he's going to talk about that as well. This is a massive interview. If you enjoyed the Jeff Kleeman inside look at the world of early Brosnan Bond, you're going to get the same thing in regards to sneakers and The Sum of All Fears from Phil Alden Robinson.
Yeah, this is not Cam and I blowing smoke to try and get you to listen. Like, if you're going to listen, you're going to listen. I'm just telling you that next week we are talking to Phil Alden Robinson. We recorded this a while back. It's a tour de force. It is close to 2 hours chock full of information about sneakers, Sum of All Fears, and a personal favorite of mine, Field of Dreams. It was originally at one of those interviews, it's like, oh, hey, I think we got like 30 minutes for you. And it just went on and on. Natural and insightful and fun. And I hope that is an omen for the rest of 2025.
Yeah. If you can kick off the new year with an interview like this, who knows what the rest of the year will promise.
So there you go, folks. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to join us next week as we celebrate sneakers and Jack Ryan's The Sum of All Fears with the man behind the films, Mr. Phil Alden Robinson. We can't wait for you to hear it. We know you're going to love it. If you want to help support the show, join us over on Patreon, patreon.com/spyhards. Over 100 bonus episodes over there, spy TV shows galore, plus a bunch of other episodes of films that are connected to spies and spy actors. Our Agents in the Field special. You can go find out more about that and the link in the show notes below. And if you don't already, join us over on social media where we'll be continuing the discussion on this episode, talking about all those topics and if you agree or not and what your picks are at SpyHards everywhere. But until... Oh. Cam, we might just have had one final voicemail. Let's roll it.
Final message.
Oh, hey, Spycast. Don't know if you're catching this or recording but you know what? I checked out your show this year and it's become my new favorite podcast. I love the deep dives you take into film. I love how detailed you are. I love how thorough you are. And, I just enjoy the conversations that you have with each other on the show. So you've got yourself a new huge fan. So this is Morgan in Langford, British Columbia, wishing you all the best in 2025 and looking forward to more episodes.
And there you have it, folks. What a beautiful way to wrap up 2024. Morgan, thank you for that beautiful voicemail. We're glad to have you here. We're glad that you've found us. And I think that is a beautiful way to sum up our year and lead us into 2025. But until then, folks, we'll see you among the shadows. I knew I'd forget it. Oh, yeah. And stepping outside of the Goldfinger golden shower.
What?
Don't quote me on that one, folks.
And so it was announced March 1st, 1982, that he would be collaborating with John Belushi on film.
He would be collaborating on film. Coming to cinema near you. Film. The great epic of our time. Film.
First the train came through the screen, and now this. Collaborating on film.
It's like the THX or something. It's just like film. Whoa.
It's that guy sitting in the chair being blown back by the sound. Oh my God. New Year's Day, folks. Okay. That's going in the blooper reel. So it was
film.
I wrote these notes at 2 a.m.
Did you write it that way? Film as well. That's actually what you wrote.
Yeah, on film, yeah. It does say that. Okay.